In the series of online teaching, now I will introduce the another practical of basic mechanical engineering lab, that is introduction and classification of IC engines. And before that, I will start with the introduction of engine. As we all know, engine is a device, machine or a system which is used to convert one form of energy into another form. Another definition, as you can read from here, a machine with moving parts that converts power into motion. Now, about the internal combustion engine, it's a device which transforms the chemical energy of fuel into some useful mechanical work. There's another transformation of this energy from chemical to thermal and then after into mechanical work. Generally, engine converts thermal energy into mechanical work. Therefore, they are also called heat engines because they converts heat energy into some mechanical work. Now, let's come on the classification of engines. They are of two types generally: external combustion engines known as EC engines and internal combustion engines named as IC engines. Now, for external combustion engines, in these types of engines, the product of combustion of air and fuel transfers heat to a secondary fuel which is used as a working fluid for the cycle, just like same as in boilers. But in case of internal combustion engines, the combustion takes place directly as a motive force for the purpose or for the moving of the system, like engines used in cars, bikes and buses, etc. Okay, now let's come on the classification of engine. Now, internal combustion engines generally classified in many ways, but from the subject point of view, as the part of introduction, there are few classifications listed over there, and in that, first one is according to the type of fuel used. Okay, now as we know, petrol engines is one of them. Okay, petrol engines also known as Otto cycle engines, in which petrol is used. Second is diesel engines, in that diesel is also used for the ignition purpose. And third one is the gas engines. As we all know, now CNG engines are in use and LPG engines are in use. Okay, now second classification is that according to the method of ignition of the fuel, there are three types: spark ignition engines, compression ignition engines and hot spot ignition engines. Now, what are the spark ignition engines? In case of spark ignition engines, there is a spark plug which is used to ignite the fuel inside the chamber. And in case of compression ignition engines, it will happen the ignition of fuel with the help of compression only. But in case of hot spot ignition engines, a hot bulb is used, or that we can say the red hot metal surface inside a bulb followed by the introduction of air, that is also known as oxygen, compressed into the hot bulb chamber by the rising piston. Okay, there is some ignition when the fuel is introduced, but it quickly uses up the available oxygen in the bulb. So this kind of systems now these days are not in use, but they were previously used by some engines. Okay, so that is not in use right now. These are type of hotspot ignition engines. Now we'll come on the second classification, and that is according to the number of strokes per cycle. As we know, there are two types of classifications: four stroke engines and two stroke engines. In case of four stroke engines, there are main four general strokes: suction, compression, expansion and exhaust. Okay, in suction, the charge comes inside the combustion chamber. During compression, it will be compressed. In expansion, after ignition, it will be expanded. And in exhaust, the burned gases will be exhausted from the combustion chamber. About the another classification, that is two stroke cycle engines. In these type of engines, all previously explained strokes, suction, compression, expansion and exhaust, are merged together, and they are completed only in two revolutions of the crankshafts. That's why these engines are known as two stroke engines. Now another classification is based on cycle of operation. First one is Otto cycle, that is also known as constant volume cycle. Why it's a constant volume cycle? Because once the charge, that is the mixture of air and fuel, admitted inside the combustion chamber, there will be no change in the volume of that charge. That's why this process or this cycle is known as constant volume cycle. And another classification, that is diesel cycle, also known as constant pressure cycle, because in these type of engines they are also known as CI engines, compression ignition engines. Ignition takes place by the compression of the charge or compression of the air. In this, as the previously supplied volume is further altered by the supply of fuel into it, and that's why there is no possibility that the volume will be fixed. But for the ignition purpose, the pressure has to be maintained always to attain that self ignition pressure of the diesel. That's why they are also known as constant pressure cycle. But in case of dual combustion cycle, there is partially constant volume and partially at constant pressure this cycle works. Okay, now another classification based on the RPM of the system, that is slow speed engines, medium speed engines and high speed engines. Now another classification that is based on cooling of the system. First one is air cooled engines. As in case of bikes, all engines are air cooled engines in which air is used for the cooling purpose of the engine, and where engine is not exposed to the open air surroundings, it will be cooled with the help of water cooled system. And in case of evaporative cooling, is the enhanced version of water cooled systems. Now in evaporative cooling engines, water in the liquid phase is introduced into the cooling jacket of the engine, and a control system allows this water to boil off and to become vapor. The liquid phase and the vapor phase are separated in a separator tank, and the vapor is returned to the liquid state in a condenser. A pump is used to circulate the flow around the system and to minimize the pumping power. This pumps the liquid phase but not the vapor phase. So in case of evaporative cooling systems, the system efficiency is higher side in case of water cooled system and air cooled systems. So that is the enhanced version of previous two. Now based on another classification, that is fuel injection system based. First one is carburetor injection. Now in case of carburetor injection systems, a carburetor is used, that's a device used to prepare the charge, that is the mixture of air and fuel, to supply this into the combustion chamber. And another one is air injection engines. See, in air injection engines, it's the control strategy in which fresh air is injected into the exhaust system for the secondary combustion of the exhaust gases. Okay, and in case of airless or solid injection systems, what happens that a solid injection system, that is the pressurized fuel supply system, in which atomized fuel used in the combustion chamber with the help of a fuel injector. So that is the airless or solid injection system into the engines. Now based on according to the number of cylinders, there are single cylinder engines or multi-cylinder engines. Now in case of single cylinder engines, if the power requirement is less, it will be done with the help of a single cylinder system. But if the power requirement is at a higher side, the number of cylinders will be higher. Now same as that, in continuation with the above one, according to the arrangements of the cylinder, as per the available space in the vehicle itself, there will be arrangement in terms of vertical arrangements, horizontal arrangement, or in case of radial availability of a space, that will be the radial arrangement of the system, and they all are known as vertical engines, horizontal engine and radial engines. In multi-cylinder engines, when the power requirement is at higher side, the number of cylinders will be higher, and when the cylinders are arranged in V shape, they are known as V shape cylinder engines. And opposite cylinder engines, cylinder will be placed in the opposite side from one another. Okay, and opposite piston cylinder engines, piston will be in the opposite side with the previous one. Okay, now according to their applications, stationary engines, automobile engines, aero engines, locomotive engines and marine engines, these all are specified based on their requirements and the uses in a particular industry or in applications. Few facts about engines. We all are engines.
Cars have more than just one piston involved. The more piston, the more power. A cannon is a very simple type of combustion engine. There is no oxygen or air in space, so rockets have their air tanks next to the fuel tank. And the amazing one, black holes are the universe's most powerful engines. And based on that, in 2009, two researchers proposed a highly theoretical spacecraft powered by the mini black holes. And at last, technology gave us another type of engine that is not exactly engine, but developers use software packages called game engines as the template for the world in which a video game is set. So thank you very much, and we'll meet you in next practical. Thank you very much.